Welcome to week 6 of Cultivate. Well done for still being here. So far we have asked 4 questions. Why are we here? Why do we plant? How do we start? What do we plant? And this week we're asking our 5th question, how do we plant? And as usual, let's begin with a 1-minute recap to remind ourselves where we have got to so far. And as we said last week, it's getting harder and harder to pack it into 1 minute, but here we go, our 1-minute recap. Each week in Cultivate, we have been talking about journeys, missional journeys that God instigates to reach the 99% of people who know nothing about him. And the starting gun for these journeys is call and vision. God usually calls you to those places you already inhabit and those people you already encounter. These journeys are not solitary. They're nearly always done better in community. And these communities, worship communities, they need planting. And these worship communities have a number of characteristics in common, a top 5 characteristics, in fact. They're defined by missional vision, they have a missional culture, they have an intentional plan to make and grow disciples that covers the whole discipleship journey, and they focus on the important rather than insistent stuff. We seek to plant communities that reflect their context, and we seek to develop and grow the key priorities: community, discipleship, mission, worship, and leadership. Okay, that's our 1-minute recap. Let's get started on week 6 as we try and answer our next question, how do we plant?
So here we are in week 6. We've spent the last 2 weeks looking at what we plant and these crucial characteristics of these new worship communities that are designed to bring the gospel to the lost 99%. This week, we want to look at the question of how. How are we going to plant them? What's the process? And we'll do that by looking at our planting cycle on page 33 of your books. Then we'll hear from some real people, some people who are or have been going through the process of setting up new worship communities, and then how we're going to help you set and start up these new worship communities. The life cycle is a remarkable feature of any living thing. Some life cycles are weirder and more wonderful than others. For instance, there's a type of bug called the 17-year cicada, which lives underground for, well, you've guessed it, for 17 years. And it eats tree sap, and then suddenly it emerges into the open air. It lives for 1 month, it mates, and then dies. The most disturbing life cycle is probably the parasitic wasp. It injects its host with their young. They release chemicals so that they can control the mind of the creature they're squatting in, and then slowly eats their host from the inside out. Every living thing has a life cycle, and a worship community is no different at all. It's something that has a birth, it grows, it develops, and ultimately, sometimes, it dies. All this is good. And it's as it should be. But we've always been quite hesitant about talking about the planting cycle or the process of starting a worship community. And here's why. Because in no way are we suggesting a process as opposed to a set of principles. Principles are much more important than process. We've spent 2 weeks on answering the question, what are we planting? And 1 week on how do we plant? Because what, in many ways, is more important than how. It is more important what a worship community is like than the process involved in bringing it about. And here's why. Firstly, process can be regimented, whereas we know that one size doesn't fit all. And it's wiser taking principles and appropriating them in your own context. Secondly, process makes it sound like you finish one step and then you move on to another. Whereas we know that the most important actions are the things you repeatedly do. Finally, process sounds clean and tidy, whereas we know that the reality is much messier. However, despite saying all of that, the reality is that really, there are some things it's important to do before other things, and some steps need to be taken before other steps. And the reality is that all principles require actions. If we have principles without actions, then it's just theory, it's just hot air. So we've reluctantly put together a planting cycle which we think crystallizes the most important principles of planting. This planting cycle basically takes the principles we've been looking at over these last few weeks and it puts them into an order that would suggest is most beneficial. So let's very briefly recap on what each stage means, and for what each stage we'll say what it is, what the key question is, and what the key action is. You'll not be surprised that the planting cycle begins with purpose. This very first stage is about vision or about purpose, and you'll have probably been in a coma these last few weeks to have avoided our discussions on this. We've been saying for the last few weeks that it's really the very first stage of planting. Missional vision, missional purpose is the bedrock, the anchor, the magnetic north of planting. It's vital to identify who you're called to and what you want to see happen. And as we mentioned in week 4, the more specific your missional vision is, the more effective your mission will be. Avoid being vague. If you can't hold a mental picture of the type of person that you're trying to engage, then you have yet to land on a missional vision. Form the worship community on the basis of your missional vision and use your missional vision as a filter for all your future decisions. It's vital that you pray for it, vital that you identify it, vital that you discern it, and then articulate it, even using the 8-word technique on page 20 if you can. And then making sure that everything you would do is aligned to it. Start with vision, start with purpose. But there's always a temptation to move on from vision to doing, from purpose to planning. Please, please don't do this. This is such a big danger that planters fall into very quickly, and it's one of the reasons that we've reluctantly agreed to putting down a planting cycle. Oftentimes, a planter will think, I've got a purpose, I'll make a plan. But our advice is, don't do it yet. A plan is great, but not yet. Before you make a plan, you need people. You need a team. One of our later principles for leaders, when we talk about team principles, is that vision is given to one person, often, and a plan is given to many, always. You are never asked to accomplish this thing alone. And a really effective planter shares a vision with other people, but not a plan. If you allow others to shape a plan, you immediately get their buy-in. If you present a plan, you've already lost their buy-in. If you want partners, you must have partners buy in. And so after vision is team, which is all about people. Get the right people together, the right group of people, a team, even if it's just 2 or 3 people, before you start working out the details of what you're going to do. Find other people who share your passion and who are drawn to your vision, who will go with you on this journey. Finding people is the first big job after you've identified your purpose. And even then, don't move into planning. The first thing you should do together is pray. Prayer is about power, and without prayer, there's no power to achieve anything. All the way back in session 2, when we talked about the driving force of urgency, we said that desperate sacrificial prayer was a crucial sign of urgency, a recognition that none of this works without God. We'll speak more about prayer next week, but one of the key principles that we talk about in Cultivate is that prayer is more important than planning, and discernment is more important than decision making. John Wimber, the remarkable kingdom pioneer, he once said, I'm in favor of planning, but only after God speaks. And Henry Nouwen said these great words, Christian discernment is not the same as decision making. Reaching a decision can be straightforward. We consider our goals and our options. Maybe we list the pros and the cons of each possible choice, and then we choose an action that meets our goal most effectively. Discernment, on the other hand, is about listening and responding to that place within us where our deepest desires align with God's desire. So it's vital to pray together, to figure out how prayer is going to underpin your vision, your strategy, your planning, your activity, your community, everything. And finally, after purpose, people, and prayer is in its place, you can move on to mission, which is all about planning. And even though you'll plan loads of stuff, the key question is, how are you going to make and grow disciples? What's your missional plan? The primary purpose of planning is missional. Don't leave this to the end of your list. Start with it. Work out what your 3 E's are on page 23 of your booklet. For those of you who are focusing your missional vision, what's your plan for engagement, for encounter, for early discipleship? How are you going to engage them? How are you going to bring them to an encounter with Jesus? And how are you going to disciple them in those early days? And the key thing with all of this is intentionality. Ensuring that you actually have a plan for this at the very heart of your new worship community. One of the reasons that worship communities aren't missional is that we don't plan to be missional. We don't invest in the whole discipleship journey. For those of you who are called, what is your plan for engagement, for encounter, and for early discipleship? And so to our final stage in the planting cycle. Grow is about priorities. It says develop in your books, but grow is a much better word. And this is what we focus on 2 sessions ago. New worship communities are about church. It's not about attempting to filter unchurched people to proper church somewhere else. Therefore, it's incumbent on you to grow the church in microcosm, micro-church. These 5 priorities are vital ways of growing your worship community. If you focus on them, if you develop them, if you pray about them, church in its maturity will develop. And if that happens, you're going to continue to grow leaders. And then the next person's going to hear their call and their vision to start a new worship community. And so the cycle begins again. It's vital to figure out how you're going to grow these 5 priorities: community, discipleship, mission, leadership, and worship in your worship communities. How do each of these 5 priorities develop contextually? How do they grow and develop in the context in which you find yourself? It's vital that you've got a plan for the growth and development of each of these 5 priorities. They should fill your windscreen and be the focus of your effort and your attention. And if we do this, then we will start seeing a growing array of worship communities planted and sustained and grown in many contexts. We'll see communities of disciples with missional vision for a particular neighborhood, network, or people. A community that understands and reflects its culture and has a definite plan to make and grow disciples. A community committed to discipleship, centered on community, driven by a desire for justice, persistent in evangelism, a culture of each one reach one, a community underpinned by a radical practice of prayer, a community led by leaders who grow other leaders. And I'd like to suggest that this would describe our worship communities. And if we plant worship communities like this, we will see God's kingdom grown in our time, in our towns and cities. We started our block of looking at worship communities a few weeks ago, talking about urgency, looking at the brutal reality of where we are as a church. But this is the hopeful prospect of where we could be. Wouldn't we want to see that happen? Okay, once again, let's discuss a couple of questions in our groups, and we'll see you in a few moments.
So far in our Cultivate course, we've spoken mainly about ideas and principles and heard from some people who are based far away, sometimes in another country. But this week, we want to hear from people who are based in Liverpool Diocese, who have already started on the journey of planting new worship communities, trying to answer this question of how do we plant? It's often best to observe and learn from those who are doing it already, who are already on the journey. Some of these people will be leading worship communities that are many years old and fairly established. Some will be starting things that are very new, very recent and very fragile. Some of these worship communities will still be going, some might even have ended, but all will be led by people like you, ordinary people who've stepped out in courage to answer the call from God to reach the 99% of people who know nothing about Him. Let's watch this for a few minutes and then reflect on what we have seen.
So I'm Lucy, I live in Wigan, and the worship community that I lead, I'm local missional leader for a community called Wellspring. Wellspring is based in a church hall, which is very conveniently located on a primary school ground. So it's wonderful. So the families will come out of school at the end of the day and just nicely file into the church hall, which is on the school grounds. And we meet once a week on a Wednesday, 3:30 till 5. So straight after school, they'll come in, and the children have activities. They can go out and do crafts or sports. And that gives us about half an hour with the adults to share our faith. And we make it very clear that's what Wellspring is. The vision of Wellspring is building community and exploring faith. So they know when they come, that's what they're going to get. And we also then provide a free hot meal. So the facilities are fantastic. We have a fully working kitchen. And so we are able to provide a free hot meal at 4:15. And we all eat together. And then we all leave about 5 o'clock. And we also do things in holidays. We go on beach trips and camping trips and have barbecues and pumpkin parties and Easter egg trails and things like that.
My name's Kathy and I'm at St Michael's All Angels on Gartons Lane, 4 acre. And we started Meals with Jesus around about January time, which we didn't think many people had come to, but week in, week out it started to grow, which is just amazing. And it's just a mix of the local community coming in, having a meal together, sitting and chatting with each other. And then after that, we just do a bit of a Bible verse. Kathy, the other person that does it with me, Kathy Higgins, she gives a bit of a talk, and then that's it. Then they just go on the way. Sometimes we do a bit of sung worship, which is nice, they enjoy, hopefully. But yeah, that's what we do.
Well, I'm Frank. I worship at St Andrew's Church in Denton's Green. And about 2 years ago, I felt God calling me, and I decided to go back to church to attend St Andrew's. And then very soon found myself signing up for the Cultivate course. And during that, we were asked to consider taking worship out into the community, i.e. wherever we go. And I thought, well, the only place I go is to the nursing home to visit my wife, who was a resident there. But that made me think that there must be others in the same situation, having had to deal with my wife's Alzheimer's disease and the impact it had on me, that it led me to think, well, others must be feeling similar things and perhaps need some help, and that led to forming the relative support group. We have regular worship gatherings, about 6 to 8 weeks, no, 4 to 6 weeks, and that involves Bible reading, little prayer, and some hymns, songs, it's good to see people do get some pleasure from that.
We've been going since October 19. We started in this beautiful brand new building as a result of what God was saying to us, and we meet on a Thursday morning from 9:30 till 12 o'clock. It's a wonderful intergenerational place. So we have babies and we have 92-year-olds. And usually we have anything between 70 and 100 people here. And the other wonderful thing about it is that we have a lot of Hong Kong people who've moved into our area. And they've been a wonderful asset. So not only are we intergenerational, we're also international. So we have all sorts of things happen during the morning. There's a cafe that's open. Everything's free. We don't charge for anything. But in the middle of the morning, usually about 10:40, we shut everything down. And we give everybody 5 minutes notice. We rearrange the chairs and we all come to the front for a time of worship. We call it power time. And we have some children's songs because we have some very little ones. And we have some older people's worship songs. And then we always have a Bible story, which, yes, it's told at a children's level, but it's told in many different ways, puppets, drama, any sort of shenanigans you can think of. And then at the end, we always have a thought, if you like, for older people to really get to grips with. But what we found is that everybody comes to that. Even those who would not consider themselves to be interested in Christian things, they'll come and join in.
Of course. So my name is Reverend Mark Orrell and I'm a Fit for Mission curate based in Church St Helens in Merseyside.
Great. Good.
And I currently lead the Breakfast Club amongst other worshipping communities and St Philip's Church, located in Parr in St Helens. So I've always had a heart for pioneering ministry, and always felt like, God wanted to use me in that area. And when I became a curate, I realised that actually God had placed me in this context and given me a vision to work with people that kind of were on the edges of community. And in Parr, where I minister, there's a lot of poverty, and I believe that God gave me a real vision for working with those people that needed food provision, that were suffering from food poverty. And as a result of that, we started the Breakfast Club, which aims at feeding people both physically and spiritually. That's our mission statement that we developed using the Cultivate course. Yep, so people meet. We have an informal time of breakfast where we'll do things like bacon butties, cereal, toast. But that time is really just about building relationships and getting round a table and talking to one another and sharing stories of faith.
Great.
Then we move into a time where we have crafts and other creative outlets, and then we have a time of worship. And after our time of worship, we'll normally say a kind of final prayer, a blessing, and people will leave. And as they leave, we like to bless them by giving them something to take home, whether that be bread, literal bread, or kind of something that, some kind of word or tract or something to take home for them to think about to the next Breakfast Club.
So, as I mentioned, I wasn't involved in the original startup in 2017. I came along with my child about 2018, and then I started to volunteer. But I know for a fact that this year that they rooted in prayer is probably where all the energy, for Wellspring is coming from. We need people obviously to lead, but I think that established in prayer was just very, very important.
Yes.
I was quite amazed at the knowing that God was at work and driving things and creating situations that help get things off the ground, putting the right people in the right place at the right time. So I think it was important to be open and alert to opportunities that came along, and they weren't put there by me. But it was important to follow up on that, to develop the idea, and then to build a good, strong team to help with all of that. I couldn't do that all on my own.
The biggest thing that I could tell people about starting well is don't start alone.
Yeah.
Make sure that you get a team of people that are equally passionate and share a similar vision to you. That was quite easy for me in my context. I've been lucky in that sense. So there are a lot of people around here that see the need and wanted to make a big difference. So we have people from different churches that have come on board to kind of outlive and outwork this vision of feeding people both physically and spiritually in Parr.
And one of the most important things, which was really, I'll come back to this later, really kind of like a risk, but that was we never chose who we wanted to be part of our team. We felt we had to trust completely in God. Be bold, be strong, and listen to me. So we opened it to everybody, and we took anybody who wanted to join us, which goes against kind of human common sense, really. Be careful who you put together, be careful what you're doing, because it could be difficult. And there were times when it was a bit difficult, but this has been a refreshing thing for our congregation, our old congregation too, to be able to work together in a new situation in ways that we hadn't been able to do in old situations.
Biggest challenge is having the belief in myself that I'm able to do it. I've never been a confident person, but God's sorted that over the past 4 or 5 years. So yeah, that's been the biggest challenge for me, is believing in myself really that I can do it and that people will come. Yeah.
I think overcoming the trepidation about engaging with people and the fear of rejection. But I did find that some of the other relatives would, knowing the situation my circumstances, that they asked, how do you cope? And that opened the door for me to be able to talk about how my faith has helped me, and just briefly, that's been quite good, and I hope that will, develop further.
I think the biggest challenge has been sticking to the original vision. And the original vision really was God saying, use this place for my glory, put everybody together, stop breaking people up into artificial groups. Let's come together as the whole extended family of God. And to be bold and not to dilute, not to be ashamed, not to sort of wishy-washy around with our faith and what we believe. Right up front, this is a Christian place and we are going to talk about God.
I think that the biggest challenge with any kind of work that we do here in PAR is inevitably people will move away. So the hardest challenge for us was that we had a family come from Iran who we supported. We loved them very dearly, and had got the opportunity to kind of minister to them, baptise their children. I became their godfather, and then this family unfortunately had to go back to Iran. So losing them was a real challenge for us, but on a more practical level, I think as well, just maintaining the kind of passion for the project, and kind of encouraging and re-encouraging my leaders to continue, and reminding them that actually, though we do see a lot of small wins, it's those small wins that make a big difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
What we heard from the Fruitfulness Framework is that they feel like they belong, that they feel supported, that they are more calm, more tolerant, more content, they're happier, they feel like they're a better person. Some of them feel like they've found God again, they feel loved, they feel wanted, they feel part of a family, they feel confident, treasured, safe, peaceful, and more open-minded about Christianity. So although, I'd love to stand up there, preach the gospel, they all get saved, hallelujah. We are seeing the kingdom concepts come into their lives in terms of peace and joy and, calmness. So I guess, I can't be too disheartened. I have to just keep looking for these seeds of the kingdom and, enjoying those really. And I do find joy out of that.
And there's been times where they've interacted, questions that we've been asking that they've interacted with that, and it's really nice to see. And it's just nice to hear people saying that they feel safe and accepted here. It's just so nice to see. And we do have 2 jars that we have out at the front as they come in. One is a good news jar, one is a prayer jar. And it's nice to see people putting any good news in there or any prayers that they have. And at the end of every session, we read the good news and we say the prayers, and then we all say a prayer together for whatever prayers people have put in. So yeah, it's really nice just to see the community coming together.
The biggest joy with regarding the context of the Breakfast Club, I think, was in one weekend we did 8 baptisms.
Really?
And
Wow.
I got to baptise this full Iranian family,
Right.
as well as some other baptism families that we've done, and actually seeing those people begin a journey of discipleship and come on a faith journey with Jesus and be integrated into our St. Philip's family has been a real joy, and just really seeing and coming alongside people where they're at really, and coming alongside them in their challenges, and just being able to pray for them and share the love of God with them. And we've seen some remarkable things happen as a result of that, in terms of praying for people and just kind of really seeing God at work in our kind of context and community.
Great.
So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Lifetime, which we begin to see now as a trunk, branches have come off it. So we've got a Sunday lunch service going on now. So that's branch number 1. We've got English conversation groups where we reach out to our Hong Kong community, which is huge in our area of Warrington. We've got 2 Bible study groups, and we've got a craft group, all of which have come out of Lifetime.
Okay.
This is within a 5-year period, which of course includes COVID.
Right.
So the biggest joy has been seeing growth within our congregation.
Just do it, because it truly is, it's amazing what God can do from nothing. It's just amazing. Just trust in God.
Great.
Trust in God.
Yeah.
Listen, be open to what might be being put before you, and you never know where it might lead.
Yeah.
We have learned as individuals to be obedient one little step at a time. We don't see the big picture. We have no idea where God is taking this, and it doesn't matter. There is no end game other than to tell people about Jesus.
As we anticipate coming to the end of the Cultivate course, the question is, what's next? Where do we go from here? And in our experience of the course, we've recognised that there are often three outcomes that we will be inviting you on in your continuing journey of mission and discipleship. And they can be found on page 34 of your workbook. And the first outcome is what we simply call start. If it is vital that we have these new worship communities that we've been talking about these past 6 weeks, then it's important that some of you are called to start them. Are you called to lead a new worship community? Those in this group might already know what God is calling them to do, or might already be doing it, or might have had an idea emerging within them over the past few weeks, something that God is calling you to do. So for you emerging leaders, at the end of this Cultivate course, you're invited to join a Cultivate leaders group. A leaders group is a group of lay leaders who are on the journey together. It's a group that's about support, prayer and learning. A group of people who have your back, will pray for you and will learn leadership lessons together with you. These groups are typically based in your own church, and they'll be led and convened by a clergy leader, from which you will also receive regular one-to-one mentoring. In addition, you'll be invited to a termly gathering, where everyone who is helping to lead new worship communities across your new parish will also be invited. These sessions will be about extra content, about sharing stories, encouragements. They'll be about enabling, and you will also get access to our podcasts in which we will share ideas and resources about many additional aspects of planting and leadership. So you'll receive training and mentoring. You'll be prayed for, learn and grow together in a group of other people on a similar journey, supported and enabled at every step. This idea, this vision, this emerging bud of something that you have is precious. We think that you're precious. We believe that it will bear fruit for God's kingdom. We want to help you, support you, build you up and invest in you. So this is our first outcome, the start outcome. The second outcome is what we call join. Not everyone is called to lead a new worship community right now. Some are called to join a worship community that someone else is already leading, or a new or established community. Over these last few weeks, when we've been talking about call and vision, when we did that exercise on the three N's, when we've described what these worship communities are and what they do, maybe you've had a small growing sense of a call toward one that's been planted or already has been planted. Even though you don't feel called yet to lead one of these, you might feel called to belong to a worship community, to support and enable the missional vision.
These principles over the past few weeks have been about deepening your understanding of worship communities and your own sense of missional call. And let me say this about people in this group. You are vital for the emergence of new worship communities. As you heard us say earlier on in the planting cycle, a leader with vision for something can't get going without 2 or 3 people to gather around them, to help them, to support them, to enable the vision to move forward. You might not see yourself as a leader yet, but you are an enabler. And God's kingdom won't advance without enablers. So this is our second outcome. This is the join outcome. But we have a third outcome. And that is for those who don't yet have an emerging sense of missional call, who are still on a journey of understanding and discernment. And so you are invited to explore, to go deeper in your journey of missional discipleship. We want to help you to continue on the journey that you've started, to explore what it means to be a missional disciple. And so we invite you onto a discipleship program called Activate. We won't give any more details about Activate at this present time, apart from saying that it's about setting up small groups of disciples who are seeking to grow in their missional discipleship and explore further what God might be calling them to. So those are the 3 outcomes. But don't forget, these things are really flexible. As you grow in your discipleship, we hope people will be moving from explore, maybe to the join, or even into the start stream. And there'll be those who think they're joiners who might end up as starters later on. Fundamentally, we are all on a journey of growth, of development, of going deeper in our discipleship and in our missional call. So if you're in those first 2 groups, the start and the join outcomes, we'll be gathering you together after this course and for a few weeks working with you to solidify your sense of purpose and mission. We'll help you to start to work your way through the planting cycle, help you to discern your sense of missional call, that thing that God might be calling you to be involved in, either to lead or to join a new worship community, enabling you to identify the people that you'll be doing this with, encouraging you to establish your prayer, helping you to build a plan, and then ultimately enabling you to grow and develop those 5 priorities in this new emerging worship community. And alongside all of this, as part of this group, you'll receive regular mentoring. You'll meet one-to-one with a clergy person or key lay leader every month or 6 weeks for encouragement and for prayer. So, how will you know which of these 3 outcomes you will go on? In order to help you to decide which is right for you, we invite you to a one-to-one conversation in 2 weeks' time. And it really is just a conversation. It's not an interview or anything like that. In fact, if you want to have a look at the things we will talk to you about, have a look at page 39 in your Cultivate book. We want to do 2 things in that conversation. Firstly, we want to hear from you. What has impacted you from this Cultivate course? And secondly, what do you think could be next for you? What can we pray for together? Whenever we've done one-to-ones with people from Cultivate, they always comment that it's been one of the best parts of the course. This will be a very open and easy conversation with a clergy member or key lay leader with no pressure, and you won't be forced to do anything. We will even send you the questions ahead of time so that you can think about them beforehand. But above all, we want to help and enable your journey of missional discipleship that God is calling you on, whether it's start or join or explore, to reach the 99% of people that lie beyond our current faith communities. I hope you've enjoyed this session as we've explored this question of how do we plant, looking at the planting cycle, the important stages of planting new worship communities, as well as hearing stories from other people who have been there before us. Next time, we'll be looking at our 6th question. How do we keep going? How do we persevere in these journeys of missional discipleship and planting that God has called us on? But for the final time today, Let's discuss a couple of questions in our groups, and we'll see you again next week.